Music is the language of emotion. As humans, we are so easily able to recognize the feelings evoked by sound, even if we're not musically literate ourselves. Composers for films and games harness this power of music to communicate emotional context to the audience, and sometimes the score is able to completely dictate the meaning of the piece. Shadow of the Colossus is the perfect example of this. So in this episode of Game Score Fanfare, we're going to take a look at how the game's soundtrack speaks to our emotions and shapes the story being told. The game opens with the main character Wanda travelling horseback to the Forbidden Land, an isolated and desolate region long abandoned by humanity. This ancient no man's land is represented in the music by the bouzouki, an instrument which composer Kow Otani saw as old and ethnically ambiguous. Although the bouzouki is actually a rather modern instrument and has associations with Greek and Irish Celtic music, it is closely related to its descendant, the pandura, which had variations pop up not only throughout Europe, but across the Middle East and Asia too, as early as the 4th century BCE. Wanda is travelling with the lifeless body of a girl, intending to ask the god Dorman to resurrect her. Dorman agrees on the condition that Wanda slays the 16 colossi that roam the land. This opening scene is scored by a mournful piece featuring the bouzouki, as well as strings, organs, church bells, and a choir. It is reminiscent of a requiem, a piece of music originating in the Christian Catholic Church for use in funerals. This music is referred back to in a cutscene, when Wanda wakes up at the altar after defeating a Colossus, cementing the theme of death and loss and reminding you of the purpose of his mission. Once the setting and story is established, the game begins in earnest. Your first job is to locate the Colossus, which you can do by holding your sword in the air and following to where the light gathers. You are searching, exploring, climbing, but aside from your horse Agro, you are alone. There are no side quests to complete, no friends to make, no enemies to fight outside of the 16 colossi. It is a lonely adventure, which is emphasized by the soundtrack. It's silent. I've talked previously about the roles that silence can have in an adventure game, but in Shadow of the Colossus, it's almost entirely a mood setter, making this vast, empty land feel all the more empty. In a way though, the silence also serves as an encouragement, being a constant reminder that it is solely up to Wanda alone to complete his mission. This part doesn't happen in every case. Some of the more aggressive colossi will attack Wanda on sight, leading straight into the confrontation. But for the other half, the more docile colossi, there will be a moment of discovery and then observing the Colossus in its natural habitat as you work out how to mount it. This would usually be an opportunity for the score to start building the energy with some tense, suspenseful music. Dissonant strings and drums growing to a crescendo is what you might expect. That's not the case here though. The music is actually quite calm, reflecting the surprisingly peaceful nature of the Colossus. And it's rather ambient in nature too, mimicking how these living landscapes exist in harmony with their surrounding ecosystem. The music speaks not to the potential danger of the colossi, but of their majesty. This is the beginning of an inner conflict within the player. By taking a moment to watch the colossi and have it cast in an innocent light through the tender music, you briefly think of it not as a monster to slay or a boss to defeat, but as a living creature. It plants a small seed of empathy within you, a moment of hesitation and gathering courage to take down this giant. But you persevere. This is it. This is what you came for, and the soundtrack delivers on the emotion in spades. It is grand, melodic, orchestral music with swelling strings and triumphant horns, a total contrast to everything that has come before, juxtaposing the quiet, calm, and empty with the enormous, loud, and exciting. This makes the Colossi feel even more gargantuan and helps to catapult this moment into the spotlight. It is a cathartic release to have a score that finally lets loose and actually sound in line with how you feel. In a word, heroic. Up until this point, the music has worked against this feeling. There is no adventure in the silence, nothing intimidating about the encounter tracks that would spur on this conflict. For the first time, the music isn't subverting your expectation, but rather driving directly into that emotion. It is supportive and righteous. That twinge of doubt from earlier is entirely forgotten when you're filled with adrenaline and in the moment. Scurrying across the beast in search of its glowing weak points, you raise your dagger high for the final blow, and... As the slain Colossus heaps to the ground, there is no celebratory victory fanfare congratulating you on your achievement. Instead, we get another requiem, funeral music. This connects the death of the Colossus with when we first heard a requiem, carrying the lifeless girl to the altar and petitioning Dorman. And so it represents the completion of this mission, or at least 1/16 of it. But further than that, it suggests that the life of the Colossus is comparable to that of the human girl. You have this moment of revealed clarity that perhaps Wanda's mission is not as righteous as you initially thought, but a selfish one. The realization that the creature just slain was perfectly innocent, many of them not even fighting back in self-defense, just attempting in vain to shake you off. This moment is core to the experience of Shadow of the Colossus. The musical bait and switch turns your moment of victory into one of introspection and regret. You feel conflicted, guilty for valuing the life of one over another. It brings into question the moral ground on which Wanda, and by extension the player, stands. From here on out, you view the world in a different way, tainted with the regret of a guilty conscience. The quietness that once defined your loneliness is now deafening as you are left alone with your thoughts to dwell on your actions. Instead of encouraging you on your mission, the silence now casts doubt over it. Encountering the Colossus no longer feels calm and peaceful, but mysterious and sinister. And the climactic battle with the Colossus tracks start to sound less heroic and more villainous and tragic in tone. The game slowly becomes more and more uncomfortable as you realise that you might not be playing the hero of this game, but rather the villain. And this is visually hinted at too, as Wanda's character model becomes increasingly more corrupted and demonic looking as he kills more of the Colossi. Upon taking down the 16th and final Colossus, Wanda awakens at the shrine and is greeted by a group led by a shaman, who followed Wanda into the Forbidden Land to stop him in his mission. But by this point, Wanda has been completely corrupted by Dorman's power, who then possesses his body and transforms Wanda into a shadowy Colossus himself, literally taking the form of the bosses he fought. But as the Requiem suggests, the Colossi are not the villains of this story, but rather victims. When the shaman completes the ritual to seal Wanda and Dorman away, they struggle to escape its pull, and as they do, well, listen to the music. It's the same Requiem. Wanda is not the villain at all. Just like the Colossi, he is yet another victim of Dorman. Wanda was warned from the very start how it would end, but saw no other way to bring the girl back. He had no choice but to do Dorman's bidding, and he did not fight back. The use of the Requiem throughout Shadow of the Colossus weaves a story that is not told through its narrative or mechanics. It turns the heroes into villains and the villains into victims. Shadow of the Colossus will be remembered as a landmark title that bucked design trends and blurred genre lines. But what truly separates it as a masterpiece is its story. A story that is almost entirely spoken through the music. Without its soundtrack, it's arguably just a David and Goliath story with an added damsel in distress. The music is what elevates it to become one of the most deeply moving experiences that I have ever had from a video game.